We are live. What's going on, everybody? I got a theme song. I'm going to play
The Ryan Stick Show.
Oh,
how did you come up with that?
In about 3.5 seconds, which
I love
is
it.
sometimes the best things are thought up in 3.5 seconds. But Kirk, you seem to be a master of your craft. You've been doing this forever. It is an honor, everybody, to welcome Kirk R. Thatcher to the show tonight. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and the audience. And everyone's got a lot of questions. So right before we get into those questions, just tell me, how many years have you been in the Muppet universe?
I started around 86, so 35 years.
Wow. 86, huh?
Yeah, 1986 when I met Jim. And so started working with him just a month later. And yeah, so they're 30 going to 36 years now.
Okay, well, how does one meet Jim Henson? Because he's kind of a tall, gentle giant.
Yeah, I had worked on Star Trek 4 as a producer, associate producer, and we met when we were looking for special effects houses to do some of the effects. I met with a gal who was working at a company called Omnibus Able, and her name was BJ Rack. And her husband, or her ex-husband, I think they were separated, maybe divorced, was Jim Frawley, who was the director of the original Muppet movie.
Yeah.
James Frawley or Jim Frawley. So when she and I started talking about effects, we just hit it off. She's very personable, and we had a similar sense of humor. So I was working with her as a art director for commercials. Like, she would bring me in to talk about, what the idea was. They were trying to sell themselves as they were selling themselves as a special effects computer graphics facility. So anyway, I showed her, actually, one of the things I showed her was this guy I brought here. He's missing an antenna. But
Oh,
I showed
sweet.
her, I had all these creatures that I built a show around that I was pitching or developing. And she said, who would love that, and you should meet is Jim Henson. I said, I would love to meet Jim Henson. I knew a bunch of people who worked with him on Dark Crystal.
Oh, wow.
And so I met him. She made the introduction, and I guess, it's been so long ago, his office called me, and we set up a meeting, and I went and met him at the Bel Air Hotel, which is a beautiful hotel nestled in the hills of Bel Air. And we had lunch, and I went back to his suite, he and his assistant, and I had a big portfolio, and I brought, I think, this guy and another sculpt I have of these creatures that was in this comedy show. And we just talked about everything. We talked about, my idea, his ideas, what he's done, what he was working on. We talked a lot about Labyrinth because he just finished it.
Okay.
It had come out within that year, and it had not been successful. And he shared that. He said he was very disappointed, and he asked me what I thought of it. And we just talked for like 2.5 hours. And he's just, kind of a very interesting guy, very kind of, I wouldn't say low energy, but very mellow, kind of like, that's really neat. He said things like, that's neat stuff, he very, very
Kermity.
yeah, not imposing, very gentle, like you said, gentle giant, very sweet energy, very accepting, good listen, just like all the things you would kill for in a boss. And so a few weeks later, it was kind of funny. I was living at my folks because I got paid so little on Star Trek 4 that I had to move back in with my parents, but it was definitely worth it. My mom comes out. I was working in a studio. We had a studio out in the garage that I was doing some artwork, and my mom came out and said, honey, Jim Henson's on the phone. I think it's one of your friends doing like Kermit impression. and so I'm like, oh, okay. So I go, hello. And he's like, hi, Kirk, this is Jim. And, I was like, oh, hey, Jim. And my mom, her face went white. She's like, and so I talked to Jim, and he asked, if I'd be interested in working with him on something. So I hung up, and my mom was more mortified. She goes, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I said, why? And my mom was very sweet. She said, I think I acted. I was sort of like, oh, hi, Jim Henson. Sure, I'll get Kirk for you. Like, she was very kind of presentational about it. And so she was embarrassed. I said, I don't think he noticed. He doesn't know you, so probably couldn't tell. So that's how I met Jim, and we started working initially that first year from 86 to 87, just over the phone, and I would fly out for meetings and work it at home. And then in 1988, I moved out to New York to his offices there and worked on the Jim Henson Hour with him and everybody. We shot half of it. We shot all of it up in Toronto. And
Oh, wow.
then,
Okay.
yeah, so I lived in New York half the year, and then the other half was in Toronto. And then that did not get picked up. So I said I was going to move back to LA, and Jim wanted to keep me in New York. I'm like, I don't want to take your money if you don't have a job. It seemed weird to me. I'd always been sort of, a gig person, not a corporate person.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved back to LA, and while I was in LA, I did a few things. I worked in RoboCop 2. I worked.
Oh, cool.
I worked at Imagineering. Actually, I got a job as a consultant or a contractor, not an employee at Disney Imagineering, working on they were redoing Tomorrowland. And while that was happening, the Henson Company was negotiating with the Disney company to purchase the Muppets and Jim's, whole milieu, except for Sesame Street, I think. And so I started consulting on a couple of the Muppet Show rides or Muppet rides they were doing. And then Jim and I started working on Dinosaurs. He had this idea, and the way Jim worked, which was so great, he's just like, an idea about like a sitcom, but with dinosaurs to kind of, showcase dinosaur thinking, he called it. About the environment and treating the world and each other in a nice way, as opposed to like, we own the planet, we can do whatever we want. So I'd done a first round of sketches, and I met with him, went over them. We talked about that. I made some notes and started just scribbling with him. We had lunch. And then the meeting was over. This was a Friday, and sadly, he passed away, I think, the next Tuesday. It was crazy. So, there was,
really? Wow.
There's the baby dinosaur. So, yeah, you can see some of the sketches on the DVD. If you have the DVD, I don't know if it's on YouTube yet, but there's an interview with me, and I'm holding up some of the sketches, or they're on a easel next to me.
So just to be vitally clear, you designed all the dinosaurs. Those came from your imagination.
Yeah. Oh, well, the bulk of them. I think after season 2, Pete Brook, who now runs the Creature Shop, designed a couple of them. But the majority of the show and the whole look of the show, even the houses and everything, was my kind of production design, if you will, or character design.
Internet, are you hearing this? Did you know? Okay, dude, you were like a high-functioning Forrest Gump when it comes to everything I love.
Like,
okay,
someone else said not Forrest Gump, but Zelig. I don't know if you ever saw Zelig.
Yeah,
but he's in all these things. Yeah, in some ways.
Exactly, but the fact that I had no idea I was going to talk to the guy that designed all the dinosaurs in the show Dinosaurs tonight. I'm like, Kirk Thatcher, the good director, nice fellow. I didn't realize that so much of my life and what I remember and the imagery that I grew up with all comes from your hand, man, because the Dinosaurs was a hell of a show. Now, just since we're on the dinosaurs, before we get to all your questions, thank you. Keep asking them in the comments.
Yeah, sorry, guys. This is going to be a long show, so
we will answer them. Yeah. But I just got to ask, how does one become the wereman? Considering
well, it helps to be a producer and write the episode.
Okay.
And originally, I talked to Rick Baker about, because I thought, there you go. I talked to Rick Baker about playing the caveman, and he would do his own makeup. But,
this is when you were the bass player of Slayer, apparently.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. Or Slade, either one.
There you go.
So I just love the idea of the dinosaurs inventing Halloween, and Robbie, his little brother right up there. I mean, there he is. It's backwards. Yeah. So being a little creep, and so he wants to scare him like older brothers do to little brothers. So essentially they invent Halloween, and I think the episode's called Little Boy Boo. And what's funny is I played that wereman. Bill Beretta, who was the dad, was Earl Sinclair in the suit, played the other wereman. So we both got our cameos as cavemen. Although, but me playing caveman is not big. It's not a big stretch. I have quite the forehead.
Kirk, I gotta tell you a funny story about that episode. Not only did I rewatch it the other day, and a lot of Kirk's work could be watched and enjoyed on Disney Plus right now, actually. But not only did I rewatch it the other day, but I got to tell you, when I was a kid, I loved Halloween, loved all Halloween specials, and I rented that episode on VHS. Now, back then, they kind of like, some VHSs will cram a few episodes in there to make a $3 rental worth it. Not this one.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up watching it like 4.5 times because, you got to get that $3 worth it out of there. $3 to a 9-year-old in 1990 something is a lot of money. But I got it stuck with me though, and the humor behind it. And when my darling and I were watching it the other day. We were just like, man, this episode is 30 years old, but God, these effects are still great. And that's something about puppets. That's something about puppets.
Well, you can't beat reality.
Yeah, you can't beat reality, but CGI, when CGI isn't where it should be, it ages like yogurt.
Yeah.
But great puppetry can age like whiskey.
Ages like mayonnaise in the summer. Yeah.
It's
well, that's it, because it's really there and it's light's really hitting and it's really moving. It was fun. My favorite little bit from that is even the piggy toes. I don't know. It always makes me laugh when the grandmother is saying, he has to eat the baby's toes. And he's like, even the peaky toes? Anyway.
Just on dinosaurs before we get to the questions, and everyone keep asking them because we're going to answer them. Did Kevin Clash, who played the baby, I'm assuming because I hear the Elmo voice there. Is this before Elmo blew up? He played baby.
No,
Sinclair?
Elmo was kind of a hit like the first year he appered. So Elmo was already huge.
But not like Tickle Me Elmo huge like 8 years later. No.
He was growing in fame and fortune, but he was not the superstar he had become. But yeah, Elmo was well known because Kevin in fact sometimes would go from baby Sinclair to Elmo just to kind of instead of not the mom, he'd be like, Elmo, I hate you. It was close, but there was a difference.
You're quite the voice actor yourself, Kirk. Can we hear your voice in any of these classic movies and shows that we should look out for?
Well, in chronological order, the Gremlins 1, some group stuff, but Gremlins 2, I did a lot of Gremlins voices. There was a TV series called Eek the Cat that there was a segment on it called Clutter, and I did the voice of Clutter and the character of Cop. What else? I mean, I kind of do little bits here and there. I did some narration I'm singing in Star Trek 4. That's my voice on the radio, the punk song. Michael, a buddy of mine, Michael Giacchino.
Wait. So you're a punk on the bus, singing playing your own song obnoxiously, listening to your song.
But what was funny was the song didn't exist when we shot the scene. I did it afterwards. I just kind of did it. So when it came to adding the song, Paramount didn't really know what real punk music was, and I'd been a fan of punk rock since the mid 70s, or since 77, I guess. It was like my 10th grade. So I said, well, that's not punk rock. They were talking like Duran Duran, or I forgot. It was more like new wave. And I said, that's not punk rock. Punk rock's like Dead Kennedys, True Sons of Liberty, And I remember the music editor, the music guy's like, yeah, no, we're not gonna license any of that. So I told Leonard, I'll just write a song, and then I did.
Amazing.
And, he loved it because it was so bad. It was so bad, which was good. Yeah.
Did Leonard Nimoy get a kick out of finally getting to take out a Kirk of some kind?
We did have fun. We laughed about it, and he was great, and he was such a great boss.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Let's
do some questions. Yeah.
Let's do some questions. Yeah. Well, young Kirk Thatcher says you can ask me anything about the shows. And no, I'm kidding, of course. Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room because a lot of people are asking about this. So I'm sorry, but in Muppets Haunted Mansion, it sounds awesome and everything, but Kermit's voice sounded not that right. Well, that's true that Kermit has been recast recently, but he's great in Muppets now. But tell us a little story about the new Kermit voice coming in and your opinion about people asking.
Yeah, well, we get that, whenever Kermit changes, like in 1991, he changed voices, and Steve Whitmire, because Jim Henson passed away. So Steve did it for, 27 years. It was Kermit, and a lot of people your age and a little younger grew up with that. And so now in the last 3-4 years, we've recast Kermit again, and it was a very extensive process. A number of people auditioned. It got down to 4 amazing puppeteers. I know all of them, and they're all like top notch. And it was the Henson family was a big part of it, actually, which I didn't learn until after the fact. And they shot scenes. They had a whole audition process with each one of these guys did a audition, or a number of scenes with Kermit, probably a singing scene, a drama scene, a comedy scene, in different sets. I mean, they really did it to see who could convey it, and they decided after much deliberation because it wasn't easy. Because again, I know all these guys and they're all top-notch puppeteers. They decided
Mm.
on Matt Vogel, who also does Uncle Deadly now, and he does Floyd in the band. And so the voice sounds different because it is a different person. And when people bring it up and said it ruins it for them, I always say, well, the fact that James Bond doesn't talk like Sean Connery bother you because he's changed guys and doesn't even look the same like 6, 7 times. And people don't go, well, that's not the James Bond I grew up with, so I'm not going to watch it. It just, I think partly it's because the puppet stays the same, so they expect that continuity. But the other big part of that is the Muppets have never done voice recasting of voices. The Muppets now, the Henson Company did it. They did it with the new Dark Crystal thing. They were all in that celebrity casting, and they do that to get eyeballs. Sure. But with the Muppets, the purity of those characters and why I think they do last, and people still like them and get so attached to them, and I understand it, is because they stick with whoever's doing the performance. The actual puppeteering does the voice. So there's a connection there that isn't just, dubbed over or looped over, as they say, later. So it's just, if you don't like it, then don't watch anything new. I don't know what else to say. The voice is changing. It's a different guy. He's not an impressionist. The idea is that they embody the spirit of Kermit, not necessarily the perfect vocal match. So I understand. We've been hearing that a lot. Any time it changes, they got a lot of it. When Steve Whitmire took over for about 3 or 4 years, people were like, oh, it's ruined my childhood, and these aren't my Muppets, and Kermit sounds different. And, and then so it was too much for them and they walked away, or they went, no, okay, I still like Kermit. I mean, it doesn't change. We didn't change his personality or the way he looks. So I don't know. That's kind of my response. Okay, here's a question.
I was just going to say something about
sure.
after Kermit was recast. I kind of noticed that in the next few movies when Steve was voicing, I mean, with Muppets Christmas Carol, it was more of the Gonzo and Sidekick show, and that followed through with Muppet Treasure Island and Muppets in Space.
Right.
Muppets in Space, especially like Kermit, the figurehead of the Muppets, was actually kind of like naturally not put in the limelight as much, but also gave room for a character like Gonzo to grow, which is a great question, which is something to bring up with this great relevant question. Amy Young says, hi, Kirk. Gonzo and Pepe are so perfect together. My favorite for Muppets Haunted Mansion. What can you tell us about why you chose that chose to pair them for the story, and how you choose other Muppets for their parts?
Well, I mean, this is unique in that we were kind of casting Muppets outside of Gonzo and Pepe to play, like Fozzie played Hatbox and all that. So I'll address that second half first. It's more like whose energy is right for it, who's just funny, like Fozzie's the Hatbox Ghost. Because he's so likable and furry, and the Hatbox Ghost is this kind of skinny ghoul, I just thought it would be hilarious. And the way we used him, it's how we used him. There he is. The way we used him in the show is that he's a stand-up comic, and he does this, bad magic trick where his head disappears and appears. So it was just a group decision. I had a big part in it as the other two writers, Bill Beretta and Kelly Younger, and Jim Lewis, when we were developing the story, who was going to play what. So between the four of us, it was just, and Jim and I worked with the Muppets since the 80s. Jim's probably 2 or 3 years, he's past 30 years with them. So we just kind of know the characters and know what we think would either be a funny fit when it's not like a big scene. We're not, we don't want to ever throw the character away for a gag, but because we were recasting them, it wasn't Fozzie, it was a ghost that looked like Fozzie. We thought we could, have some fun with it. So that's how it, and then Gonzo and Pepe were chosen. Because it was Gonzo's story when we were first concocting story. This challenge of spend the night in a haunted house is such a Gonzo thing. Just prove that he's a daredevil and he can do this. So it seemed like perfect for him. And since Rizzo is not around right now, because again Steve Whitmire had left the Muppets. So Pepe is funny as heck. And just also the two of them, you've got Pepe, who's sort of this self-obsessed narcissist who wants to meet, beautiful ladies and have a swinging Hollywood party. And so much so that he never actually hears Gonzo say, it's a haunted house challenge. Pepe just hears party at a mansion. I'm there. And he's got, he's going to be all suave and deboner and meet the beautiful ladies. And so it just kind of really fit with those characters, because the other part of it is like Fozzie like we knew that Pepe was going to be terrified, but not going in terrified. Like Fozzie would have been terrified the whole time. Like, you know, Kermit would have just been sort of rational. I mean, we wanted those extreme personalities. I think it helped make the story more fun. One thing about Kermit is, you know, he's kind of, what do they say? There's chaos, neutral, chaos, you know, negative. Kermit is neutral good. You know, he's not super hyper. He's not really chill. He's kind of in that middle ground. So having him there with Gonzo, he'd have just been trying to talk Gonzo out of it, and it just didn't seem like fun. So we just thought that chemistry would work really well with the story.
Amazing. Do you want to pick the next question, or would you like me to read one?
Sure, I can go through a couple actually, just because they're fast. First of all, say hi to Jesse, the #1 Muppet fan.
Awesome. Hey Jesse, how's it going? Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
And Coenga 23 has got 2 questions I can do. Do I have a next Muppet project? Not officially. I'm developing stuff and talking to people, but I don't have anything. There's nothing been greenlit, even into development. Do I think a Muppets? And his second question: do you think a Muppets Tonight reunion special or continuation is possible? Can't wait to see Clifford. I don't know if it would be Muppets Tonight specifically because there's a rights issue with that concept, but some kind of Muppet show. I mean, which is what the Muppets Tonight was, just Muppets on a TV station instead of a vaudeville stage. Something's going to happen. I'm not saying that I know this. I know everyone's been talking about it. Like, how do we just get back to the Muppets doing what they do really well? So that's always being talked about. I think it's being talked about now. I'm not part of the Disney Muppet team. There really is no creatives. It's management right now, and so they kind of bring us in, writers, directors, to work on projects. So, you know, and I've got a meeting scheduled to go pitch ideas. So, you know, that's obviously one of the ones I would love to do. But as far as I know, nothing like that is on the books.
Okay. Well, just to say though, everyone watching right now, I'm sure, and me included, Haunted Mansion is awesome. And I really appreciate the way that, you know, knowing Disney lore as much as I do because of shows like Behind the Attraction on Disney Plus, that the Toys That Make Us people produced, you know, knowing about the Hatbox Ghost and how important that was to the history of the ride and how it hasn't really come out. The fact that you've given these pivotal characters in that ride to the Muppets and brought them to life in the dinner scene. The dinner scene is a huge thing, and the ballroom is a huge part of the Haunted Mansion. You managed to include it all. Was it really hard to adapt a theme park ride without Johnny Depp? Like it's, you know.
And in the case of the mansion, no. I mean, I think the Jungle Cruise, they had a much bigger job, you know, because it goes through 7 rivers of the world, where the Haunted Mansion, you're going through a house. What's great about the Haunted Mansion, I think why it's such a, you know, a famous ride and why people love it so much, is there is a story. There's a linear, I mean, it's subtle, but there's a linear progression through it. And as we were concocting the story, being a huge Mansion fan, I said, well, we just got to follow the story. I mean, in terms of maybe the plot's a better word. The story is really about Gonzo and Pepe, but the plot is they go through the front door. Well, we go through the graveyard first. That's the big difference. But it would seem weird to walk up to the house with this huge graveyard and not do. So we also wanted to establish the tone and not give away that the ghosts were all going to be Muppets. So we had our human ghosts and our Muppet kind of generic ghosts, and to set the tone with a fun, spooky song number, you know, Rest in Peace, and then go into the house and then just follow kind of like the ride does. I mean, we kind of broke down essentially after the ballroom. You know, in the ride, you go into the attic. Well, no, that's not true. We would go into the attic, and then Gonzo's walking up and down the hall. So pretty much 2/3 of the movie follows exactly how the ride works, with just a couple detours.
That's amazing.
You know, there is no famous person's room in the ride. So yeah, well, it just kind of it lent itself really well to a linear story, which was great.
There's a secret Disney restaurant in one of the towers, but like, you know, but not in the Haunted Mansion. Yeah.
Oh, on the Mansion. Yeah.
Yeah, not in the Haunted Mansion. Okay, there's so many questions. By the way, thank you everybody for joining us, including Chris Fafalios, who, and sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, buddy, but he has a great podcast called He has a great podcast called Krista Makes a Podcast with the singer of Less Than Jake. I don't know if you've ever heard of the great band Less Than Jake. That's more my generation, but
I have heard of it. Yeah, it's Canadian. Is it a Canadian band?
No, it's an American band from Florida, and
okay, I have heard of them.
Yeah, they're an amazing ska punk band, and they have this great podcast where they break down songs and interview the songwriters, and that's awesome.
Wow. Wait, it's ska punk? Because I have a show idea that I want to have the theme song done in ska punk because it's amazing.
Then totally connect with Chris to make.
Do they have a good horn? Do they have a good horn and sax section?
They're like the best pop punk ska band in the world. Pretty much. Yeah,
check out their stuff.
Awesome. All right. Wow. There's a lot of questions. Jeez. I'm looking at this now. Kirk, you're a popular guy. Did you know that?
I know.
All right. So here's a good one.
That's nice.
What other long gone Muppet characters would you bring back if you did the next Muppet special?
Oh, geez. We brought back so many. Well, Bean Bunny, would make a lot of people on Twitter happy. I love Bean. I just thought we wanted to use him in this. He's just the puppet was too far gone, and he didn't have a big enough role to spend the money to rebuild the puppet. So definitely Bean Bunny. Who else? Because we talked about, that's usually the situation is like we love this puppet, but he's essentially dust. I'd love to bring Clifford back. He's not long gone, but I always loved Clifford, and I'm partially prejudiced because I designed him. I designed him for Kevin. And when I first started working with Jim, it was like, I want to do a character for Kevin that isn't a baby because he was doing Elmo so well. I don't know. Let's see who else. I was on a podcast with Matt Vogel, and I jokingly brought up Fleet Scribbler, which was a Muppet of entertainment reporter they tried on the Jim Henson Hour. I mean, no, the original Muppet Show, and people got excited, but no, I don't think I'd bring back Fleet Scribbler. It's such a huge backlog of Tamanella Grinderfell. That's one. Jerry Jewell played her. He might have even helped design her back in the day. She was in I think it's Hey Cinderella. She's this big funny witch character with a big purple ball face and a single snaggly fang. And she's really funny and just kind of a classic crazy witch character. And again, because I like the Muppet monster so much, I would probably. So let's say those three: Bean Bunny, Tamanella Grinderfell, and if I'm pronouncing her name right, and who else did I just say? And the other guy I said I can't remember. Who was it, man?
I'm terrible with names. I'm not going to attempt, and I'm not going to attempt a name that I don't know.
The other character I mentioned.
So much love going on in this chat. Clifford, of course. I first noticed Clifford in Muppets in Space. Is that correct? It was around that time that Clifford would debut.
He came from the Jim Henson Hour.
And Jim Henson Hour, but would play in Muppets in Space in the large house where they all live together.
Yeah, but that was also after Muppets Tonight. He was really featured in Muppets Tonight, and then the first movie I think he was in. He was not in Treasure Island or A Christmas Carol, but he was in. So movies, that was his first movie, but he was in 2 TV series.
Awesome, man. Okay, so we have a question here. Do you still keep in touch with Frank Oz?
I do. I mean, he's not working with the Muppets, but sometimes I'll throw him a question or just, like his Twitter thing. But he lives in New York, so I don't see him very often. I haven't been to New York in a few years now. But Frank has always been very, helpful and nice, and he would come visit the sets, and he's a character. I like Frank. He was very kind and invited me to watch him directing Bowfinger when it was the Steve Martin, Eddie Murphy movie. Yeah,
I love Bowfinger.
So I got to hang out all day, and he let me just sit next to the monitors, and he and Steve Martin would be talking, 3 feet away from me, and just watching Steve Martin work, because he was a huge influence on me as a kid, and then watching Frank's. It was funny because, you think of both of them as incredibly funny, and they are incredibly funny performers, but as people, when they're not performing, they're very, very studious. Like, they approach the comedy in a very that would work, or maybe if I try this, but it's very considered. they're not. I'm kind of a big goof. I'm like, well, let's not just have kind of spazzy energy, and I'm like a golden retriever puppy. But they were
Yeah.
more like two scientists divining the best way to make the joke play and get the story across. So that was just fascinating, and it was very sweet of him to allow me to hang out on set all day. So yeah, so we talk, but it's not like we text each other every week.
Yeah, they know how to calculate comedy in a sense, but also at the same time not make it seem calculated. That's what I heard about Steve Martin, where he'll just be like, someone will say something and it's not this big laugh out loud thing. It's like, that's hilarious. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Very,
Yeah.
very focused.
Well,
Yeah.
a lot of comedy writers are that way too. Being in the writer's room, I always felt like the spazzy little brother, because you're around with these guys who went to Harvard and Yale and whatever, and USC, and they're like, yeah, that would be funny. And then and then you'd pitch something and it would get a huge laugh. Not that they're not, not humorless people. They're just, it's much more of a precise distillation of what works. Whereas I'm more like of an improv nature. I guess I approach it more as a performer in the moment. In fact, when Jerry Jewell and I were writing Muppets Treasure Island,
nice.
We were at his house up in Mendocino. So he was at the computer, his keyboard, and that was fine. So I would either be pacing around talking in character and acting out the scenes, or laying on the couch and just channeling, stuff. And it was a funny, there's a sweet interview with he and I on the Muppet Treasure Island DVD talking about that process. And it's funny because he would just sit there and I'd be yelling and doing voices, and he's just at the computer very calmly writing. So, everyone has their process, but yeah. Anyway,
as seen in the writing process of Good Will Hunting as well, I'm assuming. Yeah. All right. Wow. Okay, everybody, keep asking your questions. We have a lot, but Kirk's a very generous guy, and he wants to answer all your questions. So we're going to be moving on. Jesse Oliver says, Kirk, I loved what you did for the Muppets Take the Bowl show.
Thank you. That was fun. It's not really a question, Jesse, but I do appreciate it. That was fun just because we basically got to do the Muppet Show live, and that's really what it was. The bonus for the live audience was they got to see the performers. When we were considering how to do this show, we have like a 6-foot high, black drape, and the guys are walking behind it, but then it really limits them. They're just kind of working in a line. And then Bill Beretta, who, one of our main performers and a writer and producer with the Muppets, was like, no, I think we should just have the guys and they could let them see it. And we're like, well, how do we not ruin the illusion? And so we came up with the idea, we'll film them, because at venues like the Bowl or the O2, they're so huge. If you tried to watch, you can't really see the puppets there. Some of them, Pepe's the size of a candle. So you're going to film them anyway. You're going to put them on the big screens. So he said, well,
so is Glenn Danzig. Very small. Yeah.
Wow. Ouch. If you're going to put them on the screen, just film them like this. So on camera, it's the Muppet Show. But if you're watching live, how far away you are, you'll still see the performers in them. And if you're really close, you can see them. What's funny is like when, somebody's angry, they're like, they're making the faces while they're performing. So thank you. That was a group effort, but it was really fun to write and direct. I'd never done a big live show. I'd done live theater as a performer in high school, and but I'd never directed it. And so it was, again, just like all Muppet things, a big conglomeration of live performance and canned stuff and technical things and just improv. So, and we had a great host, Bobby Moynihan was my number one choice, and he had just left SNL that spring, really, because we were doing this in the summer. And he had just left, and I'm like, please, can we go? Because there were, they'd considered a few people, but I'd suggested Bobby. I'd met him through Dave Goles and Michael Giacchino, I think 2 years earlier at Comic-Con, and hit it off. And he's just such a lovely guy. And he's just got this bubbly, kind of happy, joyous energy. And so when I knew that he had left SNL, I'm like, let's get Bobby Moynihan, because we're looking for the celebrity host. And he was such a perfect fit and such a joy to work with, and just, like, I don't know, there's people we work with, we say they're Muppet people, and Bobby, and he probably, knowing how much he loves the Muppets and things of that nature, takes it as a compliment. I hope he does, but he was just a treasure and so fun to work with, and did all the silliness and was never like, oh, is that stupid? It's like, it's really stupid. That's because it's the Muppet. So you kind of have to embrace the the joyous stupidity of it all, and he did. So thank you, Jesse. It was really fun to do that show. It was a lot of work, but it was fun. I would say the O2 was a little more challenging.
For sure. I've seen the Muppets live at the Montreal
Oh
Comedy
yeah,
Festival. Yeah,
yeah.
the Just for Laughs festival, and
Mhm.
and even on stage where you could see the guys running around and they're all wearing black, but
Yeah.
it actually made you appreciate the skill of the performer and hearing their voice, because you see that it's not some stunt casting they dub in later. It felt, the Muppets actually felt real, and naturally,
Yeah.
my eyes just looked at the Muppets. I didn't
Right.
constantly stare down at the performers.
I have a
Like,
great I have a
yeah.
great story about how magical that illusion is. When Jim was doing Carson or the Tonight Show back in the 70s, he would put Kermit on just sitting on his arm. I mean, sometimes he would be Kermit, like he'd be at the chair and just be Kermit. You wouldn't see Jim, but this was, he had Kermit on his hand and he was talking to Carson, and Jim would talk and then Kermit would go, oh, yeah, yeah, and because it was on his right hand, um, it was facing away from Car. It was across him. So they go to commercial, and the producer came up to Jim and said, "Hey, when you do Kermit, your voice drops a lot. Can you bring it up a little bit because it's getting faint?"
Okay.
Jim's like, "Oh, okay." He didn't know what that was about. He said, I'm basically, he's like, "It's my speaking voice." I'm like, "I'm Jim Henson and I'm Kermit the Frog." So he probably thought he was projecting a little more. So they come back from commercial, and Jim's doing it, and he notices that the boom guy, back in old days, television directional mics, there was a guy working it, and it was basically on a pivot, and the boom guy was booming, aiming the mic towards Kermit. That's how realistic it was. Like, well, the frog's talking, now Jim's talking, and the frog's talking, and Jim's talking. So I love that story about how, yeah, exactly. Wow, way to find that. So yeah, when Kermit would talk, because these mics were very directional, because they didn't want to pick up audience noise or backstage noise. So pretty much wherever it's pointing, that's what pick it up. And so yeah, the guy was. I love that story.
That's amazing.
So that's how real the illusion is.
I love it, man. I love it. Okay, wow. 80's asking, can you tell us more about the Muppets Haunted Mansion scene with the Bunsen beaker,
Yeah.
Phil and mulch you outlined, but had to scrap?
Sure. Well, originally it was going to be a 90-minute, movie length. It was still going to be for. It was always for Disney Plus.
You were told it was supposed to be 90 minutes?
No, we weren't told. We wanted it to be. We originally started thinking it would be a movie like the other TV movies I'd done, like Wizard of Oz and Very Merry Muppet Christmas. So we had more scenes, and one of the scenes was this big mad scientist scene with Bunsen and Beaker in like a classic mad scientist dungeon. And in it, Gonzo had said, there's a joke that's a remainder of that. It's like, you could open up my head and not find any fear in there. So the idea, it never went past just kind of a quick outline, but the idea was that they were going to strap Gonzo to a table with all the classic, Strickfad and Lightning stuff from the Frankenstein movies, and open up his brain or something and find out what was going on inside, and realize that he just thought it was all great, because Gonzo was a demon, be like, woohoo, do it again, he's and so that was the idea, but it never went past just probably a little 3-sentence paragraph. But that was the idea. And then there was a whole scene with the Swedish chef in the kitchen. And we were going to have Muppet ghost food. The Swedish chef was a ghost. He has like one line right in the beginning when they land. He's like, and he flies away. So he had a scene in a kitchen, and we were going to have rats in the kitchen, like we have the one rat in Madame Leota's room, Bubba. So those are the two scenes that I remember. Then some other scenes were longer. I think we had another song or two. Again, this was all outline stage, it was never scripted, so there really is no scene per se. It's just like a literally 2 or 3 sentence paragraph saying, in this scene this happened.
That's amazing, man. When did you find out it was only going to be an hour long? Because even when I heard about Muppets Haunted Mansion, I was like, here's another one for the books. You got Christmas Carol, Muppet Treasure Island, Gonzo's Adventures. Here's another full movie. And then when I watched it, I'm like, wow, that was great. How long was that? And I'm like, oh, well, okay, it was about an hour.
I think, to be honest, no one ever told me this, but this is me doing a little armchair sleuthing. We were told like early this year or late last year that Disney, or it came out in the press. It's not like someone came up and told me. It was just in the press that Disney was going to do another Haunted Mansion movie feature. So I think internally they said, well, we don't want two coming out within 2 years of each other. So they made ours a special and
Gotcha.
cut it in half essentially. Which, I mean, to be honest, our storyline was, and it's kind of, chicken and egg. Like we thinned out the storyline. It wasn't like a lot more to the core of it. There were just more scenes with Muppets doing funny stuff, and Gonzo went through a longer process of aging and figuring out. He couldn't figure out. He really couldn't figure out what that last thing was, and now it kind of flies by, which is a little unfortunate. It was originally scripted. Even the script was longer with a couple more beats. But again, everyone wants to leave them wanting more is kind of a classic thing, and I think with the Muppets, you don't want to overstay your welcome. So I think it works as the whatever it is 45-minute piece that it is.
Yeah.
But that's why that stuff got cut. I'm pretty sure they didn't want to have. And we followed the ride so closely, it might have made the other one look.
Well, you make the Eddie Murphy one pale in comparison. That's for sure. Like the Eddie Murphy one, I look. This is not Kirk's opinion. This is mine. But I will say that I watched the Eddie Murphy one 1.5 times. Half about 20 years ago when I attempted to, and then recently because just love the imagery, and here it is, readily available on Disney Plus. And I'm just watching it. I'm just kind of like, there's a pulse missing to this. There's a lack of joy, and there's a lot going on here. At the same time, there's not enough. Like that's how I felt about it. Just
Yeah, I don't want to knock. I mean, I know people who worked on it, and I thought it was amazing looking, and Eddie Murphy's a force unto himself, so I'm sure he had a lot to bear. When you work with celebrities at that level, they will take your project and sort of, and I don't know, maybe he didn't, but there's a lot of reasons sometimes with that level of talent, you get something that maybe wasn't exactly what was pitched, so they wanted it. I don't know, but it certainly looked great, and I love the book on the making of. And again, I have a lot of friends who worked on it. But we just tried to do. I mean, what I love about the Muppets and things like this is you can kind of have fun with something without parodying it. In other words, we weren't making fun of the ride; we were kind of having fun with the ride. Yeah. And again, the Eddie Murphy movie wasn't making fun of it at all, but they were kind of stuck with, well, how do we incorporate this stuff from the ride with an A story about a family, which is not in the ride. Like we didn't stick a family going through it. We had two guys who basically experienced like you do we even had a dune buggy in there with Statler and Waldorf. So, and that's the other thing. The Muppets can kind of break the fourth wall where, you couldn't really do that in the Eddie Murphy movie. So we're sort of afforded, I think, a looser, a little more leeway, I guess, on the leash of what people accept. But yeah. So that's that.
I'm glad they both exist, honestly. And
exactly.
I'm looking forward to seeing it too. Yeah.
The new one's got a great cast. It's got Connell and Wilson, and who else? Somebody else was just announced. Anyway, looks like an amazing cast.
I would love to see a human cast of the Muppets where they just take celebrities that oddly are remarkably similar and just have Owen Wilson play Kermit. Like he's like really a few whiskey shots away from having the same voice. Like,
hi ho everybody. Yeah, how's it going?
Yeah, anyway, like, are you out of your right. Oh man. But Vince Vaughn is like a really disgruntled Fosse, I guess. But
there you go.
All right. We got more questions. Yes. Jonathan is asking, Kirk, please tell us about what it was like seeing Monty Python live at the Hollywood Bowl. Kirk, you've been holding out on me.
Yeah, I was 18 and it was 1980, and I think it was 1980, 79 or 80, and they were playing the Hollywood Bowl, and I bought tickets for 2 nights, which is like all the money I had. And one night was box seats. I got like box seats up front. And then the other night was just the cheap seats. But on the cheap night, because the box seat, I went with friends. So we shared because I didn't have that. They're expensive. So the night I didn't have box seats, I wore an outfit. I wore like a Sergeant Pepper's marching band coat. I pinned a dead parrot to it. I wore a bowler hat, and I had a tray with suspenders over my shoulders, like a the guy selling peanuts at a ball game, but it was spam. I made a little sign that says spam, And there's a picture of it on my Instagram, I think, or my Facebook page, or both. So I had my beard, I had my bowler hat, the dead parrot, and I was selling spam. I bought like 20 cans and I sold them for like $5 and made like $40. I think I paid for my ticket actually that night.
Nice.
But so it was amazing. So I was walking up and down. I was shameless, theater kid. So before the show, I'm walking up and down going, spam, $1 a can, or whatever it was, maybe it was $1 a can. This was the 80s. It was the 70s, really. So people were buying it and laughing. They got the joke. And then they started filming the audience, and they filmed me for, all of 5 seconds. And which was fine. That was not why I was there. But what was amazing here's the great part. So after the show, I'm in the outfit and I go back to the side. Basically, the Hollywood Bowl kind of just has the entrances are not able to be blocked because people go in and out of the actual backstage area. So I was walking up to it to just see if I could catch a glimpse of one of the pythons. And one of the stagehands said, "Oh, you're here for the after party." And I was like, "Yeah," because he'd seen me on camera. So he thought I was part of the show. So I go, yeah. He goes, "Oh, it's just around there into the tent." So I go in there, and there's the pythons celebrating with Hollywood elite and, their friends or whatever, and drinking and champagne and cheese and crackers. And I got to talk to all of them. I just went up and I remember Terry Gilliam was the most friendly. He was like, "Oh, well, hey," he's really, really garrulous and friendly. John Cleese was kind of the funniest. He just looked me up and down. He's like 6'6" or something. And he looked me up and down. He said, "What's all this then?" I said, "Oh, I was selling spam outside, and I get paid for my ticket." And he just went, "Nah, quite the entrepreneur, aren't we?" It's like the most John Cleese thing you could say. I was tongue-tied. I was like, yeah. And then Eric Idle and Terry Jones just kind of, I didn't want to bother anybody. Those are the ones I felt like I guess I could approach. Graham Chapman was busy and seemed distracted, but I just think I said to everyone I could, "Wow, I love that show. It was great." But Terry Gilliam and John Cleese were the ones I had the most interaction with, which we're talking seconds, but still. Then I just hung out for a while, and I finally felt like somebody's going to catch me, so I left. I had very little courage, but enough to, if that guy hadn't said, "Oh, are you with the show?" I probably would have just stood there like an idiot waiting to catch a glimpse of somebody. So yeah, just seeing the show and then going backstage was just amazing. Because I'm growing up in LA, I didn't know any celebrities, and Python, to me, Monty Python would be like, I wasn't into sports, but it'd be like meeting the the New York Yankees or the Dodgers at the top. I mean, to me, it was just them and Steve Martin were comedy for me. So I was just completely excited. And now you can see 18-year-old me on the video Monty Python Live at the Hollywood Bowl. There's like a good 3 or 4 seconds of me, and I turn to camera and I say something or wave. I don't know, but it's funny.
That's amazing, man.
People. So I didn't even know I was in it. I never watched the video until VHS came out, and somebody texted me or called me and said, "You're in the beginning of. Is that you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me."
I would totally play the video right now, but YouTube's been really weird recently about playing clips you don't own. So just want to make sure our feed doesn't get messed up.
There you go. Well, if you can find it, I'm in literally the first 3 minutes of when they're showing the audience. So
awesome. Oh, Jesse has another question. Jesse, big Muppet fan. Kirk, I know you designed the extremes for the Jim Henson Hour. How did the idea of those characters come about?
Well, Jim wanted some just completely bananas Muppets for musical numbers. And I think they'd gone down the path of, with the movies and stuff, like, we need a whole character, we need, a backstory and what's their relationship. And I don't think he basically said, "I just want something that's completely bananas and fun." So I just got to do completely banana fun extreme characters for, I think it was Jim Henson Hour. And I just drew up these, they weren't anything. They were just sort of abstract characters, which was fun because, the Muppets really started at that. And when Jim and I would talk about things, he, as a puppeteer even, he really enjoyed those sort of non-specific Muppets, that aren't anything, not an animal, not a vegetable, not a mineral, just a thing. And so that's how they were designed, to do something that was just super crazy and extreme, hence the name The Extremes. I know Steve Whitmire had a lot of fun. I think he was the lead singer. They only did, I think they were used once for Neutron Dance. And
Okay.
but they were just super bananas and had springs for ears, and they were just like super spazzy. That was fun to design something like that. So that's how they came about.
Awesome. Big shout out to Devin J. Shanks. Him and his kids are probably watching. He says, "Thank you for bringing us a new Muppet movie. Me and the kids enjoyed it."
Oh, well, I'm very glad. That's why we made it.
Okay, Jesse Oliver's asking, Kirk, why are a lot of fans on Twitter bringing up Bean Bunny to you?
That came about because I said Bean is, I think they originally said, why wasn't Bean Bunny in the special? I said, we want him to be, but he's basically crumbled away to a heap of rags or something. And people were freaking out and jokingly and saying that ultimately became like, Kirk, you killed Bean Bunny, which I did not. I just said that some of the puppets, and they said, really? He's a pile of dust or rags? I said, well, no, but he's so delicate. If you put your hand in and push through to, puppeteer, like your fingers might come through his face. And somebody goes, oh, I want to see that. I said, that'll be perfect for Haunted Mansion. So it's really, that's what started it. And then for about 3 to 5 days, I actually changed my Twitter handle to Kirk R. I did not kill Bean Bunny Thatcher. So that's where that came about. It was just silliness, which I do.
Here's a question sorry about that. Sometimes the internet lag where I'm just like, oh, is he done? Oh no, he's not. Shame. That's how we work. That's how we work on the internet these days, living in a Zoom world. Coagula is asking, Coagula 23, hope I'm saying that right, says Cahuenga. There you go.
Yeah, it's a street in Los Angeles.
Cool. Cahuenga.
It was actually a very obscure Muppet, Gary Cahuenga.
Oh, nice.
It was a ventriloquist doll that came to life when his ventriloquist wasn't around. It was actually designed as a homage, sort of caricature of our director on Muppets Tonight.
Awesome.
Gary Halverson was his name. So he became Gary Cahuenga, and Dave Goelz just loved doing the puppet because he was like, he was just that kind of, which was very much the director Gary's energy. So that was awesome. A loving homage from Dave Goelz to our director, Gary.
We can only be so lucky to be immortalized in Muppet form in a slight,
yes,
lovingly mockish tone.
But the question, what's the favorite project? Probably this, because I got to write it. One thing that really confused me for a long time was I started writing, wrote Dinosaurs, designed Dinosaurs and writing. I wasn't director for 10 years.
So
and
amazing.
Then when I started directing, they're like, oh, well, no, you can't write it. And, I mean, they didn't say that, but just suddenly I wasn't invited to the writing process. So for me, directing this was great because I got to co-write it. And really, I think visually, it's a lot of artists do. I'm not magic in that way. But so when I'm writing something, I'm seeing it. So when I get to direct something, it's a much smoother process because I kind of know how it should look because I wrote it or, was there in the writing of it. It was all, the three of us who wrote the script. Bill Beretta, Kelly Younger, and I all worked together really closely and would, it became like, a mega mind of just the three of us kind of going through the scenes and punching up jokes and changing things. But because I was part of that process, there was no surprises. And it's not like I didn't know. Because sometimes when you're a director, you're given a script that you didn't write. You aren't necessarily as attached to the material for all the obvious reasons. So I think this by far was my favorite to direct. Also, because it was the Haunted Mansion Halloween. I mean, you couldn't literally, there's very few other projects that I would be that excited about just due to my taste.
Absolutely. And it really goes to show in all the scenes a lot of care was put. You mentioned to me when we were talking on the phone before this that a majority of it was the puppets were real, but the backgrounds and everything you saw was mostly CGI and it was built. So does that mean you had even more of a hand in the designing of the world per se?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we followed the Haunted Mansion. Our production designer, Darcy Prevost, was amazing at taking... Because we didn't build people asked if we filmed in the Haunted Mansion, and we did not. It was filmed at a soundstage in Burbank. So we had to build the Haunted Mansion in Unreal Engine, which is a very popular software program. It's actually free. So if you want a career in films or games, go download Unreal Engine and teach yourself how to use it. Because it's going to take over. It already is. I mean, that's what they use on Mandalorian. So it goes all the way up to feature films to our little project. But we built a version of the Haunted Mansion, but we didn't have the space or the money to build it out of wood and, and plaster and all that. So doing it in the computer was much more, it was the only way we really could have done this was using the Unreal Engine and this video wall, which was amazing. It was an amazing whole process where it's not just like a static background. The background moves with the camera. There's a transmitter on the camera and there's sensors in the space. We call it the volume. And so if you pan the camera, the background moves accordingly. And so if you're walking like this way in the like Z axis, if you're computer savvy, and you're walking towards something, then really like when they're running down the hallway, it's just the two puppets going like this and the hallway's going by. And it's just a big 20-foot television, essentially, a big LED screen. So that was a big part of why the movie looks so good, is that Darcy did an amazing job. And obviously the people who use Unreal Engine, and because she would draw out the plans and then they would put it together in the computer.
Yeah.
And then they would work with our DP, Craig Keefe, to light it so it matched the lighting we would be using or the kind of lighting he wanted. So it was a huge group effort, but it started with Darcy. And what the fun part was, because she and I are huge Mansion fans, and our set design, I mean, everybody was a big fan of the Mansion, but so she got really into the details. And again, this was produced with Disney Imagineering. So we had access to what I called the Bible. It was like an 80-page PDF document with all the information about the Haunted Mansion, with pictures and close-ups, character names you would never know because they aren't called out in it. And then they had all the actual specs, like the actual wallpaper and the actual dimensions of things. So she went to work like a mad woman, like just translating the mansion and all of those elements into Muppetized version of it. I mean, we kept the wall the same color, but you look at the wallpaper, it's Muppety version of the wallpaper. If you look at the door ornaments, if you look at the grates, the door handles, everything was made as sort of a Muppet Haunted Mansion Easter egg. So it's a huge amount of work by her and the art department to make it look like you're in the Haunted Mansion, but if you look at the details, you're in the Muppetized Haunted Mansion, and that was a huge part of the fun of it, was just being able to do that, what they call the overlay, like they do in Nightmare Before Christmas, but Nightmare Before Christmas sticks it over the mansion. We actually changed the mansion. So
that's amazing.
Which is amazing. Now I said Disney should turn it into a virtual ride, because you could put on a pair of virtual reality goggles and walk through our mansion. They actually even made it so it was connected. You could start at one end and walk your way all the way through to the other end. It wasn't just like a room. So every room connected to the other room. It is pretty remarkable and great as a filmmaker.
For sure. Was it easier to have control? Like, I know puppetry is very challenging, but when, let's say with Piggy, putting her in a glass ball, was it a little easier to kind of like control a scene with multiple characters, knowing that you're going to put this much effects into them and turn them into ghosts and kind of make them like, they're in the same scene, but yet they're not in the same scene?
Well, it was harder because they all had to look at each other. Like we shot every member of the band separately, but they're talking to each other. And so, you have to lay down you have to have this vision of like how that's going to play, because they're not all facing forward. That would look weird. So, the ones on the end are facing this way. And then it kind of goes, if you're going to your camera, if this is camera, the ones in the middle like this. And as you go out, they kind of, I think it's Teeth and Animal are facing more this way, where the ones in the center, Janice and Floyd, are dead on. So they looked like a semicircle, but they were also shot individually against green with floating instruments. So it was a lot of work. And then Piggy wasn't there. Gonzo and Pepe are talking to an empty room. We had a light for where the globe was, so it would cast the right kind of blue glow on them. But then we had to shoot. So we shot them with Eric, who does Piggy, doing Piggy's lines. Yeah. And then we shot Piggy separately. At one point, we tried to figure out a way to shoot her actually in a glass or plastic sphere, but it was just too hard to get a puppet head in there. The hole would be too visible, and it just seemed like more work, and it would look kind of janky. And the biggest problem was the reflections. on a real globe, you just see the lights, you see the camera, and there's no way to get rid of that. Because again, this is at this point, our DP Craig was in on this, and our production designer and our visual effects people, and we all agreed that a clear plastic sphere is a nightmare to film unless you can like wrap the whole set in black. And so we couldn't because we had cameras and all that. So yeah, we did her, she was separate. The sphere was digital. Her hair was there, but then we goosed it with CG hair. So it was a lot of work, but you know, the thing was there's a lot of pre-planning. So we weren't kind of screwed as we went through it. We're like, oh no, we did it the wrong way. We did tests and everything. We shot on the video wall for a week. We laid out shots and we planned where it was going to be, and Craig was doing lighting. So we did a lot of homework so that it would hopefully go smoothly, and it did more or less. I mean, you know, there weren't the big surprises were just technical breakdowns where, I mean, you know, like your car, you buy a new car, you don't expect it to break down, and it does. It's not like you could have foreseen that. We just didn't have AAA for the computers.
Well, you handled it beautifully, and you know, this seems to be the most ambitious project of the other projects, but that does not mean you didn't bring it with your other projects that you directed as well for the Muppets, including Muppets of Oz, in which I think it's Pepe's funniest movie, I could say. Pepe definitely, I think, is like the MVP of that flick. I think he was the most popular. Like, people really started to adapt to him and love him in Muppets in Space. But by the time he made Muppets of Oz, he was a real mainstay character. And I remember when Gonzo, who is a Tin Man, but he's like, you know, a computer, and he's connected to the internet.
Yeah,
he's a robot. I remember when he turns online, and I think Pepe said something along the lines of, "What in the holy name of God are you?"
Exactly. Well, that's me. I love Pepe. So we said, "What's Dorothy's Toto?" I said, "Well, what if she has a brine shrimp like a sea monkey?" And when it lands in Oz, it's Pepe. And we all just thought that was so funny. So that was me in the story. I didn't write the script, but I was involved in the story and kind of concocting it. So I remember that was a big pitch of mine because I love Pepe and he's such a good comedic character. But yeah, his reactions are, he's just, I don't know. He's just funny to me. I mean, the whole concept is a shrimp with a big ego, you know, I'm a king prawn, and you know, Bill's based it on his aunt who's Spanish from Spain. Okay. His wife's aunt. So the whole character kind of came from him living with her, or her living with them, and it kind of came out, and then me writing for it and having fun with this just crazy shrimp, and he's grown to be one of my favorite characters.
Amazing, man. Also about Muppets of Oz that I really want to bring up is that I believe Ashanti played Dorothy. Yeah,
Ashanti.
And that was a really cool Wizard of Oz tale, and the cast was great. I mean, Kermit playing the Kermit Scarecrow. Was there ever a thought that you wouldn't have like a live action actress playing Dorothy? Or
like some people ask, you know, would Piggy play Dorothy? Usually in these things they try and stunt cast like a big human role because that's what kind of people expect, you know, like Charles Grodin and Dinah Rigg and Muppet Caper and Tim Curry and Treasure Island and Michael Caine and Christmas Carol. So it's funny. I mean, the Muppet fans are like, why do you need human actors at all? Can't we just do a whole Muppet movie? I think partly it makes it kidsy. It suddenly seems like it's Sesame Street doing, you know, I don't necessarily agree, but I think if America had my taste, it'd be a heck of a lot more, I say adult, but I don't mean R-rated even. I just mean puppet shows that aren't just for kids. And the Muppets have kind of walked that line, you know, it's family. It's not an adult show. It's not a kidsy show, but I think people kind of put it in the drawer of like, yeah, it's a kid show, you know. And I think it's better to say safe for kids, you know, which is so is SpongeBob, and so is you know, a lot of Friends is safe for kids, more or less. I mean, maybe not 5-year-olds; they'd be bored, but you know, I don't know. I don't have kids, so my sensibility is like, why would that offend a kid? I mean, people fall in love and have sex. I mean, not that you're going to show it on camera, but like if they can talk about it, like, oh, last night was crazy. Like, Okay, as a kid, I mean, when I grew up in the '70s, so that was everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it just makes you curious, but I don't think it. I don't know. I kind of recuse myself from talking about what's appropriate for children because I don't have any. And I when I was a kid, and that's probably a big part of it, I hated stuff that was for kids. It just seemed really condescending and treacly. I mean, past
I
the
was
age
going
of
to say that.
7 or 8. Now, when I was little, I just liked everything because you're kind of developing your taste. But once, and I hear that a lot even now as someone pitching ideas. People are like, well, it's for kids, so you have to have a kid at the center of the story. I'm like, no, you don't. King Kong had no children. Frankenstein had no children. Creature from the Black Lagoon had no children.
Frankenstein had one kid.
Yes, who got killed.
It didn't turn out well.
I mean, at the center of the story. All those great movies that I loved as a kid were not kid-centric movies. In fact, most movies that have kids at the center of them, most of them are dramas talking about the trauma of childhood, like Stand By Me or something. I mean, once in a while you get, a problem child or something, but I would say, and I'm talking television series right now, not movies. But My Girl, Natty Gann, all those things where there's kids at the center are usually tragic or dramatic. And as a kid, I didn't want to see those either. So I pushed back a lot and it has to have a kid at the center. And like the Muppets are beloved by children. There's no kid at the center of the Muppets. There's 2 old men. I mean, the youngest one in there was probably maybe Scooter or Bean Bunny. And they certainly don't act, Scooter's like a college kid, maybe. So it bugs me when it's like, oh, well, it has to have a kid in it or it could be kid centric. And I think that is ill informed.
Well, Muppet Haunted Mansion has no kids in it.
It has no kids in it.
But it does have John Stamos. Let's talk a little bit about
every kid's favorite cameo.
Let's talk about John Stamos, okay?
All right, okay. Talk about John Stamos, okay? Juan Stains most.
Yeah.
Sure. What do you want to know?
Well, he seemed like a cool cat. You had a lot of really cool celebrities, including Danny Trejo.
Yeah.
So many. Who was your favorite? Who's a really rad person to work with on Muppets Haunted Mansion? I'm sure there's a few.
I mean, really, it's easier to say who wasn't fun to work with, and that would be nobody. Everyone was great.
Oh.
I have to say, it's not like I make actors, super jolly, happy people. I think the Muppets do. Like, you go to the Muppet stage, if you're going to be a jerk, I've only experienced it once for sure, maybe twice in my entire 35 years of working with the Muppets and seeing people on stage, and only twice. And they were very small. They weren't celebrities. They were famous for being well known. One was a model.
Okay.
And, literally, if I said the name, people kind of go, who? And the other one was I guess they were a singer, kind of a celebrity singer. And they weren't a jerk. They just didn't seem to enjoy, but again, not big names. You probably, especially because one was in the 90s and the other one was in the 80s. People might not even know, unless you're my age, who they were. And I'm not going to mention names, but it's just most of the time people are super happy. And they also see, I think a big part of it is how hard the puppeteers are working. Not only just, holding their arms up and contorting themselves, but then the magic of the puppet starts talking to you. And like you said, you're sucked into that reality. And any good performer is, they're called plays for a reason. There's definitely a amount of playfulness, particularly with the Muppets. We're not doing, terrible tragedy dramas. So 99% of performers just have a fun time. And I try to keep a set that is, engenders that. Like, this is a fun place. This is a safe space to be silly. Working with Joan Cusack, who was great, but I would tell her, you can go bigger. You can go bigger. And she'd be like, really? I'm like, yes, this is a Muppet. You're working with a talking King Prawn in Very Merry Muppet Christmas. I said, you cannot go too big because look what you're up against. And it's funny because, and this is human psychology, really, the Pepe as an expressive thing doesn't do very much. His eyes don't move. His head goes left and right and his mouth goes like this. That's it. But he gets so much, this is the credit to the performers, Bill and Steve and Dave, all those guys. What they get out of essentially a doll, that has arms that wiggle and a head that moves and a mouth that flaps. And so what's crazy is they're so big that if you play small against them, they'll walk all you disappear. Like you can't just be like, hey, Kermit, what's up? I mean, unless you're going for the Charles Grodin thing, which is like he's so small that it's big, you know what I mean? With that kind of Charles Grodin, thing. You can't have that straight up, soap opera kind of acting, or they'll just walk all over you. You'll just suddenly look like a zombie, So I think that's part of it too.
Well, speaking of people that you have worked with,
Stamos was great. Sorry, you bring Stamos.
Oh,
he was
so
great.
Good.
He was super fun. Loved it. The scene was much longer. He just kept ad-libbing and improving. I mean, to the point where the scene could have been 8 minutes long, and I think it's like 3. And Bill, of course, as Pepe, is just playing with him. I had a cameo in that was cut out, which it wasn't really that funny, but I had a little moment, and my first thing when I did my edit is like, let's cut my cameo out because it doesn't work. Yeah, so he was great, and I'm told he's a big Disney fan and a big Haunted Mansion fan, so that was part of it too. But he was lovely and super nice and great. I mean, they all were. There wasn't. I think they all had fun. I think they all had different strengths. Awesome. Will Arnett, hilarious and sarcastic, and Will Arnett's got that kind of, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Okay, yeah, you take that over there. It's just that kind of like I don't tolerate your nonsense. So it was great.
Lego Batman is definitely a gem.
Yes, I told him that. I said, well, everything you've done, you are the Batman.
Darkness. Every deep film begins with darkness.
Exactly.
I got to ask you about working with this gentleman, Quentin Tarantino. Not many people have directed Quentin Tarantino.
Yes, I'm the only person to flip off Captain Kirk, and one of the few. I think I'm the only person to direct Quentin Tarantino with a puppet. Yeah, that was great. That was my idea. Again, I don't write the scripts, but I get input obviously as the director, and I said we should stop the movie and have this big action scene because there's no way we can shoot it, and have the director pitching it. It should be Quentin Tarantino, and it should be super bloody and insane. And so they kind of went with it, and he loved it. He flew up. He spent 3 days, a day. Kind of got there in the afternoon, came to set. We hung out. He and I went out to dinner. He shot the next day just for like, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then we hung out that night, and then he flew home the next day. But he's a huge Muppet. He knew all the characters. Like we get people say I'm a huge Muppet fan, and they call, Statler and Waldorf the old guys, and Fonzie Bear. And like he knew everybody, and he knew he's got an enormous head. His head is the size of my head with this hat on. He's a very large head. And I think it's filled with movie trivia because he knows everything about everything. If you're a movie buff, it was just a joy to hang out with him. I know he's been getting a lot of slack recently or grief for things he said or done, but I had a blast. It was like being with a walking movie encyclopedia. And, just he got the dopey humor. I do have in my possession, which probably I will never release on the internet, but I might show at a convention one day, so we shot the scene as you see in the movie. And I said, all right, just for laughs, Quentin, do the Tarantino version. And so he swore a blue streak, as they used to say. He's jumping on that, and he's just screaming and just swearing and talking about blood and guts and flying and so it starts with like, hey Kirk. I was like, yeah, Q, what's up? And he's like, can I just try one kind of my way? And because I'm off camera, he said, sure, man. And then he does this just insane take, which was so much fun, and it was so raw and blue or inappropriate they couldn't even make it to the blooper reel. But I do have it on a DVD, and someday I might show it at a party or something. just because it's funny, I mean, it's definitely not for kids, and that was the whole point. And I remember about Quentin Tarantino's in a Muppet movie. What's happening in the world? Like, what's he gonna do? Like, is Fozzie's head gonna explode? And which was great because that was the point. It's like he's the exact wrong guy to be directing a Muppet movie, but his take on the action scene was the joke. Anyway, that was fun. That was I have a picture of him and I somewhere doing the classic director thing.
That's awesome, man. Tarantino always kind of reminded me of like, a real life Muppet type guy, like his energy, like, yeah, anyway, so in my film Kill Bill, really just really into it. Yeah.
When he says, about every third sentence. So, you see, or it's either, or you see, but he's like, yeah, you see. So like, but he's just got that very manic energy, which I vibe to. That was me, most of my life. I just have that when I'm excited about something, and he gets excited about movies. So how can you not love that? I
How
mean,
can you?
yeah.
All right, Matthew Kelly, this is an interesting one. Says, Kirk, I'm curious your perspective, but I feel like we're constantly trying to modernize the Muppets. But it seems like the best way to do the Muppets in 2021 is we just do Muppets season 6 of the Muppet Show, like no time has passed. Thoughts?
Yeah, people have pitched that, like that's what it's just called, the season 6 setup. I think you could do it. The problem is they're trying to modernize them because we live in the modern world. And I don't really know what you mean by modernize. The Kermit's still Kermit, Fozzie's still Fozzie, but they use the internet and have cell phones. I don't think that's because that's the world we live in. I mean, when we do Treasure Island and Christmas Carol and Oz, we're not modernizing them. They're in these fantasy worlds or in period pieces. I don't know. I don't think we're modernizing them. At least that's not a goal as the writers. We don't go, well, it's modern. I mean, we have them use cell phones because they live in the world. There's two kind of tracks with the Muppets. There's them as what I like to say is the Carry On / Monty Python version, where they're players who can do anything. You could put them in a James Bond movie. You could put them in a Western. You can put them in a sci-fi movie. You can put them in a horror movie. But they're still going to have that Muppetiness. But that doesn't make them, to me, modernized. So I don't, and I definitely know we don't sit around and go, well, how can we make them more contemporary? I know with Mickey Mouse, I mean, who's been around almost 100 years now, probably coming up on 100 years, it's more marketing and retail, but they had Mickey in the 80s, like Mickey was, rapping and wearing big sneakers and we don't do, and Simpsons made fun of it with Poochie, he skateboarded and drank, energy drinks and he was, out of sight. And so we don't do that with the Muppets. So I don't see that modernization happening and from within, maybe as a viewer. I mean, if voices change or something, here we go. He's clarifying. What with modernizes, even the 70s felt like they were existing in a 30s vaudeville bubble. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the premise. It's like, well, in Treasure Island, they felt like they were in an 1780s pirate film. I think if you did a season 6, yeah, you would put it back in a vaudeville stage, whether it's 1930s or not. Sorry, I should read his. So Matthew Kelly, who asked the original question, said, to clarify what he means by modernizes, even in the 70s, it felt like they were existing in a 30s vaudeville bubble, and it rarely felt even like the 70s, despite the guests. Yeah, but that was the premise. It was a British music hall. So if you were to do that, like to that point, Muppets Tonight was, well, do we really want them in an old theater? Like, have we done that? Like, can we, because we can't play with some of the stuff that's happening. And, that's now 25 years old. The internet wasn't really a big thing then. It was email, but not what it's become now. So I guess you just have to, it goes with the premise of the show or the movie. And I don't know if that's what people loved about it. It was part of its charm. It was an old theater and, but I don't know nowadays if that's what makes them charming or even a premise funny. Like Haunted Mansion is sort of timeless. I mean, they're in a limo and they have cell phones, but once you're in the mansion, it's an old Victorian mansion.
Yeah.
But so again, it might feel that way, but I don't think, again, as a writer and creator with the Muppets, we're not trying to modernize them at all. We're just trying to make them fit in the format or the premise.
Do you find that kids these days are still jumping on the Muppet bandwagon? Well, not bandwagon. That's the wrong term. Do you find that kids are seeing magic in their eyes the same way I did when I discovered the Muppets as a kid, or is it more like a parents thing?
I don't know because I don't have kids. I know people.
Okay, gotcha.
I have a lot of friends who say I'm watching my kids and they loved it, and I've also heard a lot of them say this is really my kids' introduction to the Muppets because. Well, also Sesame Street has been going on so long that I think when kids get past 5 or 6, they're like, oh, that's a baby thing. Muppets are babies for babies. So because the Muppet Show has not been on the air and Sesame Street has, I mean, Sesame Street's been on the air for, what is it going, 68? It's almost 50 years, 40, 42 years or something. Like, and it's crazy how long it's been. 40,
Crazy.
yeah. Uh, so it's this juggernaut that kind of has flavored everyone's opinion on what a Muppet is and what it's for. I think that we, well, I don't know. What am I saying?
It's all good, man. It's a weird subject, but for what I see,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
don't know. I guess what I'm
Hmm.
saying is I don't know. I don't have kids. So
Yeah.
people are saying this, if it was on every day and it wasn't a Sesame Street show, I think kids would like it because it's funny and it's slapstick. I mean, some kids just want to see cars blow up, little boys, little girls tend to like the Muppets longer, and they
Hmm.
also like Hello Kitty into their teen years, so little boys, and again, it's a big brush, and I'm not saying that one is more important than the other. I was a kid who loved the Muppets, I still do. So, but I'm like theater kid, arty guy, so I'm that kind of kid.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I think what is again ill-conceived, and I've seen it a little bit with the Muppets over the years, is like, how do we get that kid audience? It's like, make a good, funny show. I mean, Jim always said, again, I worked with the man and Jerry Joel, the guy who wrote for him, is like, it was never a kid show. It was a comedy show with puppets because you could do more. And Jim would always
Mm.
say, don't do it with puppets if you can do it with people. If it's two people in the grocery store arguing over the price of peaches, unless the peach is going to start arguing with them, why are you doing it with puppets?
Yeah.
I mean, again, if it's a pig arguing with another pig, then you can have some of the humor, but you have to cater to that and not cater to, oh, it's for kids. Again, I
Mhm.
just think that that's so condescending, and
Yeah.
it shrinks the world. I think when I was a kid, I liked Bugs Bunny cartoons. They were never, you ask those guys, Chuck Jones, it was never made for kids. It was made to make them laugh. So what makes them up, it's their strength is they were made to make adults laugh by adults who were creative. And I think if they stick with that, and they are, and Disney's not trying to do, I mean, they have Muppet Babies, and that's for little kids, but everything the Muppets do is definitely, I would say, family audience.
I would say so too, and that's another reason why it lasts so long. I mean, I think the brilliance of Muppet, and you've directed some wonderful Muppet movies, like a Merry Muppet Christmas, and also Muppet's Letter to Santa. Correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So two Muppet
Cool
movies,
Christmas.
two
No,
Muppet Christmas
I've
movies.
done
Yeah,
two Christmas movies, one
one Oz
movie, and
movie.
then one Halloween movie.
Yeah,
So I just have to do a Thanksgiving and a Groundhog Day or Fourth of July movie.
yeah. The Muppets Arbor Day. It's gonna be great.
Yes, there you go.
But I'm gonna say, I was gonna say, just based on the seriousness, I have watched Muppet Christmas Carol every Christmas Eve for 20 plus years, no matter what, no matter
Yeah.
how drunk I am, I still watch it. And I think the thing that makes that movie work is that Michael Caine didn't walk in and he was very Michael Caine and very straight. But I think it kind of resonates because even as a kid, I was like, that guy didn't walk in and say, "Hey kids, I'm Ebenezer Scrooge," and it
Right,
works
right,
sometimes. It depends on the mode, and everybody else could be big, but for Scrooge to be a
right.
character like that, it made all the feelings Muppets have so much more real. So I
Right.
there's so many different
But
approaches to the movies.
that's a
Mm,
good actor. I mean, like Tim
mm.
Curry did not play Long John Silver, quote unquote, real. He played him big and broad. He was, come on, boys, it's my only number. And that's why Tim Curry was great.
And he
And
worked so well
yeah,
too. Yeah, yeah,
but he wasn't playing down to kids like mugging to camera. He was just playing a very charming bad guy,
yeah.
which is what Long John Silver was. So good actor kind of finds that. I remember Brian Henson telling me, and I think he's even said this in print or in quotes, that Michael Caine, when he read for it and said he was do it, he said to Brian, I think I shall play him as a lizard. In other words, just that cold staring, there's no warmth to him. All
Yeah.
right. And that's, like you said, that's what works. It doesn't, again, because they're not a kids show entertainment. It doesn't play to be like, as you said, like kind of muggy and like
Yeah.
talking down to them as if they were a kid show.
Yeah, you could be silly, but you don't have to treat kids like they don't understand the world. Like there's a difference. There's another reason why I liked The Simpsons when I was a kid. Even the
Right.
serious even the serious episodes in season 2 when they kind of got a hold of how, it doesn't always have to be Homer strangling Bart all the time. There could be some real family drama underneath it. And I think Michael Caine's performance in Christmas Carol, the reason why I think it works so much is that he's so straight that literally Muppets are sliding around in the street beside him and being very big, falling out of windows, singing songs incidentally. And the contrast works and it's beautiful. And that's what really worked him up at Treasure Island too. And that's so cool. I didn't realize that you wrote it, co-wrote it. There's so many things you need to write a book, dude, because I can't keep track of everything.
It's funny. Somebody just very kindly and very sweetly said that she would love to write a book about my life. And I'm like, oh, it seems like it's over then. It's like, but and she did bring up the good point. You still remember everything because, over time, like there's just details that I don't even remember. If I'll see something like, oh, that's right, I remember that moment or that thing. So maybe start on it. I don't want to publish it next year. Maybe she does. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I look at my career sometimes through fresh eyes when people go, wait. I mean, I have people know me 20 years who didn't know some of the stuff we talked about just because I don't walk around with a resume on my shirt. It's just like it's a thing I did. It's not what I'm working on now. And I love talking about it. I mean, obviously I can gab about it for hours, but it's weird to think about your career in the rearview mirror at this point. Cause this is the first time I got to co-write and direct a movie. Now, if I can write and direct a movie, that's the next step. It's like, I want to do my own thing and have final cut. Or at least
like you got these two muscular arms, but they won't let you use both. You always have one tied behind your back.
It's partly I just want to do my own thing, to be honest. I mean, I love working with the Muppets, but there's so much. And I was on a podcast a couple of days ago, and I was saying what happens with any intellectual property or IP is what's referred to is after the creators, the originators, either pass away or move on, and it becomes a thing. And people want to kind of preserve it in amber. They want to, and it doesn't grow. And so then becomes rules. There's rules in how they should behave because that's how they behaved when the guys were creating. But when the guys were creating it, they didn't have these rules. They were kind of creating in the moment. Like what would Kermit say or do is what Jim thought he should say or do. Now, well, Jim never said or did that as Kermit. So now we can't do that. And it again, I understand it. It's a way to honor the work and the characters. But at some point you go, okay, now it's getting to be a smaller world. We're not doing as much. We're doing less and less with them because they're getting precious. I mean, it happened with Mickey Mouse and kind of the classic. I mean, I always refer to Mickey as kind of the golden goose, but also he became literally a castrated nothing. It was just a guy who behaved and said, "Hi, everybody. Hope you have a great day." I mean, literally sounds like he's castrated. Yeah. But he just wasn't doing anything interesting because he couldn't, because he's our mascot. So, that I was always concerned about that happening with Kermit, and not that you sell him down the river and have him, smoking a cigarette and going to strip shows, but, and that's not growing the character anyway, but creating new characters too. That's the other thing. Disney didn't stay successful by just doing Mickey and Minnie shorts. They started doing these feature films, and then Jim was doing that, with Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and other things. And I think Disney bought the Muppets to be the Muppets. They didn't buy the Henson Company. The Henson Company's trying to do new things, and that's what I want to do. Again, I still love working with the Muppets, and I have lots of ideas, and I'm pitching to them. But I really would love to create my own Muppet show or whatever that is, and I've been pitching the last couple of weeks because that's what you do when you're not on a job. And I realized I have 15 ideas for TV shows and 3 movie scripts. So it's not like, and that's the weird thing being me, is that I've always been a creator. And that's why Jim Henson hired me. I want you to create things. And that's why the Henson Company kept me. I create shows and come up with ideas and come up with characters and come up with stories. And with a big corporation, they don't really hire creators to do original stuff. They go, oh, come work, come do a Pirates of the Caribbean thing. Come work on this IP that we have. And then that worked out great with Haunted Mansion, because we kind of made a new thing out of 2 existing things. So that was fun.
But they hired a guy that understood both those worlds so well. That's why this movie works so well. And I got to bring up because Jesse Oliver is asking, did you design the characters for Curious Creations?
I did with amazing. I worked with the Jim Henson Creature Shop, and I worked with an artist there, and then kind of so yes, it was a combination. I mean, also, well, I will say that Rose and Rankle were pretty much just right off of my drawings. I mean, Rose was a raccoon with
that's awesome.
And then Rankle, it really is. I took some Photoshop pictures of, or I photoshopped some pictures of what are they called? The hairless cats, the Sphinx cats.
Yeah.
And put, made it skinnier and put banders on it and said, this is what, so it wasn't like a new creature, but just so yeah, I did. And then Edgar was a collaboration with, he's going to kill me because this great artist that we work with. Neil, what's Neil's last name? I'm sorry, Neil.
Well, the fact you got Neil is good, and you didn't call him Bob or
little Larry.
Yeah.
Anyway, in fact, maybe I can. Well, I'll look his name up really fast. Yeah. So I came up. Well, Christine wanted. It's interesting. Christine had a lot of ideas, which were great. She wanted Rose and Rankle to be two raccoons. I said, that's boring. If we're only going to get 3 characters, I don't want 2 of them to be the same. There they are. I said, let's do a mummified. I always wanted to do a mummified Egyptian cat because they were worshipped as gods. And I love the idea that she found him. The backstory, which is hinted at, is that she found him in a museum in London. And he was just there as a mummified cat. And she knew how to read the inscriptions on his bandages, which brought him back to life. And so he was this frustrated, demigod who was not worshipped and was always trying to find acolytes so he could, use their energy to rebuild his power and, take over the world. But that was never going to happen. And then Rose was just basically a raccoon that had been hit by a car and thrown in the dumpster and then put back together. And the biggest crowning achievement that everybody loved, because it was essentially a raccoon and we built a realistic raccoon. Well, and my thing was I gave her a fork hand and the little pink bow, and that Christine loved that. And her fork hand was because she tried to get food out of the garbage disposal and just took it. So she uses a fork. So Christine was great to collaborate with. But yeah, I mean, I essentially created the show around her and her things that she made. And I always said it's Martha Stewart's show with Morticia Adams.
Absolutely. When I saw it on Netflix, just by chance, we're like, hey, this new show, just a few years back, I just popped it on, and within 15 seconds of the theme song and the intro, I stopped and immediately called my girlfriend and said, we got something to watch later, because this is right up our alley, and it screams everything we enjoy is all in one thing, because I love puppets, but I love horror, I love spookiness, we love haunted houses, she likes crafting, and she likes to bake, so it's just like everything at once that you've always wanted to see just coming into one place. And when I realized that the director of that show is the same director of Muppets Haunted Mansion, everything clicked. I'm like, oh, horror, puppets, spookiness, puppets. This all makes sense. This guy is overqualified to direct that movie. How did Christine approach you? Did you approach her? I mean, seriously.
Well, no, Henson. So she had a producer working with her and Universal Television. And they said, we need to find a production company. So long story short, they found Henson and they shot a pilot or like a test with her and just a couple puppets. In fact, one of the puppets from Turkey Hollow, the movie I did. And it was just to see how she was on camera and kind of get an idea. And they shot it in her actual house. And it was sort of a proof of concept, which I was not involved with. And there was, I guess, a loose script, but again, I didn't know anything about it. And so about 6 months after that, they contacted me and said, we have the show we think you'd be good for. So I met with Christine. I met with the producers at Universal, and we all seemed to be a good fit. And we started making the show. We did the entire season in like 15, 18 days. And the same production designer, Darcy. That's where I first worked with Darcy Prevost, who did Muppets Haunted Mansion. And we became really close and just realized we both loved the same kind of thing. So when Haunted Mansion came up, I said, please be available. Please be available. She's like, okay, I'm turning down work to do this. Cause again, we both love that kind of world. So I'm putting together a great team over time. You work with people, you're like, oh, I want to work with them again. So that's been fun. So yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I even thought about doing a Kickstarter, just kind of saying, hey, do you love the Muppets? Do you love Christine McConnell? Did you like this? Like, I want to do this thing, and I've got a couple show ideas. And the sad part is, a Kickstarter wouldn't make a series; it would make an episode or two. I mean, unless I'm friends with Joel Hodgson, who did Mystery Science Theater, and he's been getting like $8 to $11 million to do whole seasons. But I don't have that level of. I mean, he's probably got 1 million followers on Twitter. I think I have 6,000. So I don't know how to add 994,000 people to get 1 million followers and say, hey, everyone, give me $10. Then I can make 3 movies or an entire season. But right now, I'll probably kickstart something in the next year. I was going to do it last year, and just life happened. But kickstart something to.
Life happened to everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Last year.
Yeah, it was kind of brutal. So anyway, we'll see.
The fact that Haunted Mansion was even produced in such a short amount of time in such a strange year is like quite the Muppet miracle if you really want to look at it. I mean,
it was a Muppet miracle. It was pretty amazing that we pulled it off during a COVID year and with very little prep time. I think we had 8 weeks of pre-production and 3 weeks to shoot. We shot it in 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks to shoot it, and then about 2.5 months to edit it. So overall, the whole thing was done, started January 15th, green light, not even, so production really started the 1st of February, except for writing, obviously. And then we were done essentially September. So what is that? February to September. 7 months. So less than almost about just really half a year. Because essentially after editing, it's just color timing and translating different languages. We were essentially done, I think, in August. So about a 6-month process, which is insanely fast. I mean, most people probably go, that sounds like a long time, but in the world of television and films, that's really fast, especially when you're creating a whole world. It's not like, oh, we've got a Western set and we just need to put some horses and guys in cowboy hats.
Absolutely. I don't think the Muppets have done cowboys besides like some choice skits and episodes that Muppets haven't really touched upon that.
I've been pitching it for a long time. I'd love to do a Western, and I have ideas.
A total remake of Unforgiven.
There you go. Yeah, the Sons of Katie Elder or the Magnificent Seven with the Muppets. I mean, that's what I mean. You can kind of put like that's a perfect example. If you did the Magnificent Seven with the top main Muppets, but they and they can't use guns or they use pea shooters or whatever. Like you're already laughing because it's just funny, and that's
or just bananas. Yeah,
it's just that's what I mean. Yeah, exactly. They have bananas and they throw them, but the Muppets are funny conceptually. If you pitch something, Muppet Dirty Dozen. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was a great World War II. Of
course.
Movie. Yeah.
The Muppetnificent Seven. The Muppetnificent.
Muppetnificent. That's hard to say.
This is a good one. Check it out. Like if the Muppets ever do a Willy Wonka and Charlie Chocolate Factory, I could definitely see Gonzo in the role of Willy Wonka.
Sure, absolutely.
Do you think that would work? Who would you cast?
It could be Gonzo. It could be Kermit. It'd be fun to see Kermit do something. That's what I was saying. We don't grow the characters like, oh, Kermit's just nice. I think it'd be fun to see him in that kind of. Yeah, Gonzo's the obviously. Because he's weird, but I mean, maybe have Gonzo be one of the weird kids, Mike TV or something. I don't know. I mean, because I never read the book, so I just know the movie version and not the original movie version with Gene Wilder. So maybe if you read the book, you'd be like, oh yeah. So I can't really say who I would cast because I don't know the material. But again, you just kind of it lends itself to. The Muppets lend themselves to just you say the idea and you're like, I'm laughing. It's funny. Yeah.
I always wanted to see Muppets take the Muppets in the Round Table or something, but even The Simpsons made a parody of that. Where they're like Muppets of the Round Table. It's like, unhand that swine.
Yeah.
And like Troy McClure was in it.
Right. Yeah. We actually pitched that when we were developing before Treasure Island. I was a big proponent of Treasure Island because I wanted to do a Muppet pirate movie, but the other idea that I liked was a Muppets King Arthur tale with knights because I thought that's just hilarious. The horses talk and they're fighting Morgana the Fae and the forces of darkness, and Merlin's an idiot. Merlin would be you'd cast Merlin as the sorry, this the human. The human would
Yeah.
get some great act, Tim Curry or whatever, to be the crazy wizard, and then you could just have fun with it. But it's like, it's like the D&D world.
But who would be Lancelot and Arthur? I always wanted to know that, and I'm guessing you're the right person to ask.
Well, and that's why it didn't, because when we were talking about if you're gonna do that story, it's a story about betrayal, a guy sleeping with his best friend's wife. So I said we would have to skirt that issue and not make it about Lancelot sleeping with Guinevere.
Yeah.
Or you make Guinevere, not Miss Piggy. I mean, it'd have to be Miss Piggy, because then there's very little other female characters in that story except Morgana Le Fay. So if Piggy's Guinevere and Kermit, the interesting is Kermit Lancelot, and then Arthur is a human actor. I mean, this is the kind of stories you have. Like, do we get Timothy Chalamet to play Arthur, and then Kermit is Lancelot? And so then the audience is kind of with you, like Kermit and Piggy. Oh, I get that. Like, they do love each other. And obviously he wouldn't sleep with Piggy, but they would have this love that is unrequited. And then Lancelot feels so bad as Kermit, he goes off to prove his virtue by finding the Grail, and then he turns into Monty Python for me.
I have a hard time watching any King Arthur anything without thinking of Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh, me too.
I resaw Excalibur the other month and was giggling the entire time, just thinking about all the parodies as opposed to the actual plot. But yeah, man,
I gotta wrap it up. It's been like an hour and 45 minutes. Is amazing.
Yeah, well, but I appreciate everybody. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate everybody watching and their questions. And Kirk,
all my friends, Jesse, Amy, Jesse Oliver, thanks you guys, Gary, Coenga 23.
How can we, the world, make sure that the rising star that is Kirk Thatcher, that is already lighting up the sky, how can we make it even brighter, considering you've put 30 years in this business, you've been knocked out by 40. Spock, 40, there you go.
This right.
I deny the 30 and 40 thing because it makes me sound older. But no, 37 years and proud. You've had such a long career, but filled with such amazing feats. But at the same time, the public, I find, does not know about all these feats. Like, before tonight, even though I talked to you on the phone and you're the nicest guy ever, I did not know that you co-wrote Muppet Treasure Island. I did not know that you designed all the dinosaurs in the show Dinosaurs. I did not know that you worked on Return of the Jedi. Maybe next time we'll talk about that.
There you go.
I did not.
IMDb. Go on IMDb, Kirk R. Thatcher, or go to my web page. My website, KirkRThatcher.com. Oh, that's up there. That's where you can find out stuff. And I do consultations. I read scripts when I'm not super busy. I'll read script and give notes. It's not the cheapest thing, but considering what Hollywood screenwriters charge. Good night, Jesse. Good night, Amy. So yeah, you can just find all that stuff out on my web page. There. Not used to this. I should be. And Muppets reverse everything. All right, man. Well, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it so much,
for the
man.
venue.
Awesome.
All right. Well, take care, everyone. Happy Halloween.
Have a great night, everybody. Be safe, be good, and we'll see you next time.
All right,
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay.